Hurricane Nate made landfall Saturday night at the mouth of the Mississippi River.
This is Water Street in downtown Mobile.
This is the worst hurricane that has impacted Mississippi since Hurricane Katrina.
Breaking tonight, a note found in the hotel room of Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock.
It was a mathematical calculation so the killer could murder as many people as possible.
The president tweeted there's only one thing that's going to work with North Korea.
This should have been handled 25 years ago. Should have been handled 10 years ago. I was handed a mess.
If we could make a deal, at least on a temporary basis, because Obamacare is exploding. It's gone.
I'm thrilled y'all are here, and just know that we love you. Let's go right. Helping vets transition from military life to civilian life is going to be a huge contribution to the country.
I'm Jason Aldean. When America is at its best, our bond and our spirit, it's unbreakable.
I think Jason Aldean basically hit on the same exact theme after Las Vegas.
And no better person to do that, as he was on the stage when the shooting happened, and then singing one of Tom Petty's classics there in such a beautiful way in the opening of SNL last night, and saying that there is nothing can stop the bond and the unity that we have in this country.
What a marked contrast to the politics that was played on the rest of the show.
Yeah, we're good. You know, with Stand My Ground, I love that. It's even those words are fantastic.
It is. Well, happy Sunday morning to all of you. It's great to have Dean Cain on the couch.
Hey!
And Ed Henry's okay,
Even better, too.
Even better to have Ed Henry here on the couch.
Yeah, and we've got a big 1 hour left to go on the show.
That's right.
Yes.
A lot of news, and we're going to go to this Fox News alert right away, in fact. Nate, now downgraded to a tropical storm, but not before making landfall twice as a Category 1 hurricane overnight. That means all kinds of damage.
While the Mississippi coast hit with a powerful storm surge and flooding.
The effects are also being felt in Alabama. That is where we find our own Rick Leventhal, who's live for us in Mobile. Rick, what can you tell us?
Good morning, Abby, Dean, and Ed. A remarkable transformation out here on Water Street, which was about knee-deep in water all morning long, but it gradually receded, and as you can see, it's pretty dry now. All that's left is cleaning up out here in front of the convention center and this roadway that actually leads to the I-10 freeway. We can also show you the gentleman who had been stuck in the water. He drove into the high water earlier. He's got a Mobile police officer there helping him now. They tried to jumpstart the car. That didn't work, so I assume they're waiting on a tow truck now. There were 2 stranded motors reported in Mobile. That's it. A few water rescues overnight. The biggest issue was in Biloxi. That's where the hurricane made landfall just after midnight as a Category 1 with 85-mile-per-hour winds. Not quite as strong as people had feared it would be, and it was moving so fast that it didn't linger long enough, apparently, to do a lot of property damage, although they're assessing that now as the sun comes up. This was the 4th hurricane to hit the U.S. in just over 6 weeks, but because it was weaker than Irma and Harvey and the rest, it did not apparently cause the kind of damage, although there was a lot of water on the streets and flooding associated with that storm surge, which was up to 10 feet in spots. There are hotels and casinos and parking garages along the coastal highway there in Biloxi and Gulfport that were several feet in water overnight. And this morning we can only assume at this point that it's receding just like it receded here in Mobile. Another big issue are power outages. More than 100,000 people between Alabama and Mississippi are still in the dark this morning. We just saw an Alabama power truck drive by at high speed. They clearly have a lot of work to do out here. One other thing, guys, the price of gas could go up because of this storm. They had to evacuate all the oil rigs and oil platforms, or most of them, out in the Gulf as the storm approached. More than 90% of oil production shut down, so it's going to take them a little time to get that back up again. And in the meantime, the gas prices might go up.
Yeah. You're probably right about that. Thank you, Rick. Amazing. When we went to him at 6 a.m.,
It was raining. He was getting blown about. He had the jacket on. Now he's got a T-shirt on and looks like he's sunning himself.
Cars are driving.
Not that he's on vacation, but
right. Well, the water was high behind him, as he said, and it's receded.
It's not that way everywhere, though, so we'll keep a close eye on that.
It's good to see you go through there more quickly and not do as much damage as those previous storms.
Were you guys up last night? Were you watching any of the late night shows?
You can't watch the late night shows and get up and do the show.
It's tough.
It's too late.
But
I learned that.
if you were watching SNL, you got a bit of a lecture about gun control, because that is often where the debate goes after a horrific shooting.
And that's what I want from SNL. I want them to lecture me on gun control. Let's hear it, yeah.
The investigation into the tragedy in Las Vegas this week has sparked a larger debate in America between people who want common sense gun control and people who are wrong. The guy had 47 guns. No one should own 47 of anything. If you own 47 cats, you are not a responsible pet owner. You're a crazy cat lady.
Why is it so hard to get gun control in this country? I mean, who are these delicate snowflakes that we can't just tell, no, you're not allowed to have 40 guns anymore, Earl. From now on, you can have 1 gun, max, and 6 bullets. If you can't hit what you're shooting with 6 bullets, then you don't need to be shooting at it. Learn karate or use your words. I'm sick of this narrative that Americans just love guns so much. It's not true.
Dean, you don't want to be lectured by Michael Che?
No, listen, I'd like to know karate. I can fight, but I'd rather use a gun to stop some bad guys if that was the case. You know, him telling use karate, use your words. Yeah, stop, don't hurt me. That doesn't work very well on the streets of Chicago these days. You know what I'm saying?
And no one is saying anybody needs 47 guns, especially the type of guns that this mass killer had.
No, but people are saying we have a Second Amendment.
It's
and where do you draw the line?
Yeah, well, the gentleman who saved his girlfriend, the firefighter who he's a supporter of the Second Amendment, and he wished there'd been more people there would have been able to defend themselves. You know, you just don't. It's an emotional response. You don't just jump and go, okay, because this happened, you can't have 47.
Well,
guns.
Nancy Pelosi jumped, and
yes,
she said this week, okay, let's do some small measures. But she said, I hope this is a slippery slope where it keeps going, and there's more and more gun control. She said it out front.
That's what's amazing about it, is everyone said all along, if you give them this, they want this, then they're going to keep going till this, because the ultimate idea is to end the Second Amendment, which I think is absolutely horrible.
You're right. We had that firefighter on earlier last hour, and he was there at the concert when the shooting happened. He's a volunteer EMT as well. His girlfriend got shot.
Yeah.
Likely would have lost her life. He ended up saving it, and to have him on, and his emotional reaction was pretty powerful. But we asked him, is this the right conversation to be having right now, just days after the shooting? Should we jump to gun control? And he immediately said no. Right. This is not where we should be going. We should be talking about the strength of the Las Vegas people, of how we have overcome this, how we come together in these situations.
Because Chuck Schumer gave that speech a few days back saying he knows exactly what
the dead would
say about all of this. And meanwhile, here we have somebody who was in the middle of it. Here's what they're actually saying, and it's the opposite.
Absolute truth. And Jason Aldean, he hit it right on. That message of unity and strength and staying together, that's the right message.
He didn't go to politics.
No.
Boy, that was powerful last night. If you watch anything from last night, watch Jason Aldean, and we've been playing it throughout the show as well. So the conversation will continue, I am sure. I do want to bring you some other headlines, though. We're following the London police now releasing the man who drove his car right into a crowd at a major tourist spot. The 47-year-old has not been charged or identified after initially being arrested on suspicion of dangerous driving. At least 11 people were injured near the city's Natural History Museum. Police say that the incident was not terror-related. Luckily, none of those injuries were life-threatening. And President Trump expected to sign an executive order next week, making it easier for people to buy health insurance. The move aimed at rolling back regulations put in place by former President Barack Obama. The order will direct the departments of HHS, Labor, and Treasury to make it easier for people to group together and buy insurance through association health plans. It will broaden instructions for the agencies to explore ways to loosen regulations and possibly lower their premiums. We were just talking about him, Jason Aldean. He is not the only one paying tribute to Tom Petty. Florida Gators, watch this. The fans getting loud in remembrance of the late rock legend. Great is that nearly the entire crowd singing I Won't Back Down before the fourth quarter against LSU. Petty, of course, was a native of Gainesville, Florida. He died on Monday at the young age of 66.
That's pretty awesome that they did that like that. I really enjoyed that. So football. Let's talk about football real quick. NFL, my favorite sport, and I would always argue that's America's pastime. And it was always winning in the ratings, but suddenly, all of a sudden, it's not. And why do we think that is?
Yeah, well, you see the protests. It's been ongoing, and now the survey comes out about the favorability rating for our top sports. And you see there in August, the NFL was second, close behind baseball. Now it's September. Baseball soars up to 63% favorability. NBA goes into second place at 46%. Their season hasn't even started. It's about to start. NFL, they're in the throes of the season. Things should be heating up. 44%. They're third. Now, the baseball playoffs are pretty hot right now, so people are talking about the national pastime. Maybe that would explain why it's gone up, but why has the NFL
But
gone
also,
up?
people don't want politics when they are watching football, and we've seen from the NBA, as they're going to start their season, they have reminded their players of the rule to stand during the national anthem. Steph Curry's now come out saying that as well, because they realize this has not been good for the NFL. This has not been good for the American people who love watching football, that want to get back to the game.
It's okay to have stances and protests and things like that, and you have every right to do so. But to dishonor the flag and the men and women who have put on the uniform and fought and died for that and for our freedoms, it's just the wrong time and the wrong place. Plus, I think that they're focusing on the players, make it too big. They're making the story bigger by focusing so much on that. If someone happens to be sitting down or taking a knee, if you show it, fine, but let's not get into that. I want to hear about football, and I want to watch football.
And
I want to enjoy myself.
That's what Steph Curry said. He said, if you want to make a difference, go out in the communities and go help and go make that impact where you can best do it. And that's not
really
necessarily during the national anthem.
Yeah.
All right.
So true.
A lot of news today, as we mentioned, and coming up next, we have a live interview with the FEMA administrator, Brock Long. He joins us live. He's been through one crisis after another, has done an outstanding job. He'll have an update on their response now to Tropical Storm Nate.
Then, former President George W. Bush leading our wounded heroes on a bike ride around his Texas ranch. And coming up, he speaks exclusively with our Dr. Mark Siegel.
They all help each other. Vets helping vets is the best way to help people transition from the military to civilian life.
A Fox News alert overnight, Hurricane Nate making landfall twice as a Category 1 hurricane.
It's now been downgraded to a tropical storm, but as it heads north from the Gulf, authorities warn we are not out of the woods just yet.
And joining us now live with an update, the FEMA Administrator, Brock Long. Mr. Administrator, obviously on behalf of the nation, we have to thank you for dealing with one crisis after another. This is now at least the fourth hurricane just in recent weeks you've had to deal with. Let's start first with where we are with this, what is now a tropical storm. Where are we?
Right. So the president proactively once again pushed forward disaster declarations for each of the states to be able to help them with the evacuation life safety mission. And right now, the most important message is making sure that people don't let their guard down, particularly in the inland areas of Alabama, western North Carolina, and Tennessee, because even though it's a tropical storm at 45 miles an hour, the forward speed of this storm is one of the quickest storms we've seen in the Gulf Coast since recorded history of hurricanes began. And so you have to add that forward speed to the maximum sustained winds of the tropical storm. And so what people are going to see are basically hurricane force winds moving through all of Alabama and into Tennessee and western North Carolina.
And we've seen that the toughest parts of these storms are almost always the aftermath of what people wake up to the next morning, the damage that has been done. And as we're already seeing in some parts of this latest storm, power outages. A lot of people that are going to be without power for who knows how many days. How tough is that from your end to help?
So actually, you know, that's a great question. So the power is typically turned back on by the private power industry, and so you know, in the continental United States, what happens is that the power companies will typically stage resources close by as the storm exits. They'll go ahead and start to restring the lines and get power turned back on. I think that this is going to be an annoying event for people that may be out of power for multiple days, but for the most part, I think that they'll see the power come back on, you know, fairly quickly as the companies have been pre-positioned for multiple days in anticipation of Nate.
Yeah. He said it's an annoying thing to have the power out. It's a lot better than the life-threatening things that have been going on. Montel Williams, my friend of mine, recently went into the FEMA offices, and he said that he was shocked to see thousands of people just working the phones. You guys have been inundated. How's everybody holding up over there?
Obviously, people are tired, but we have a job to do, and we continue to work around the clock. And I think that while a lot of the focus has been on Puerto Rico, people have to remember that we still have a tremendous amount of resources in Texas. You know, you had over 119,000 homes impacted in Harvey in Texas. We're still in Florida, and on top of that, what people also don't see is that we're working disasters across 20 different states right now in the United States, and so. You know, nearly 85% of my agency is deployed, you know, along with our partners in the federal government agency, you know, across 22, 23 different agencies that are out there. Tens of thousands of people are working every day to alleviate suffering and help, you know, rebuild communities.
Well, it's an important job that you all play, Brock Long. You guys have been very, very busy. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Brock.
Thank you. Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much. Thank you.
All right. This firefighter saved his girlfriend's life when bullets rained down in Las Vegas. But despite the tragedy, he says it's not the time to talk about gun control. You'll hear from him coming up.
And after years of failed diplomacy, President Trump is taking a bold new approach to foreign policy. What will our adversaries like North Korea and Iran think about that? Former UN Ambassador John Bolton and General Jack Keane, that is a powerhouse right there. Yep. They are here to discuss next. And we are back with some quick headlines. And what a birthday gift for Putin. Thousands protesting in Russia on Vladimir Putin's 65th birthday, calling for his resignation. They're rallying in support of the country's opposition leader, demanding that he be allowed to run against Putin. More than 250 protesters were arrested. And a nuclear-like gas explosion sends thousands running for their lives. A tanker catching fire at a gas station in Ghana's capital, triggering 2 explosions, killing at least 6 people and injuring 25 others. More than 200 police personnel were deployed to that scene. Ed.
All right. Thanks, Abby. It's the comment made by the president this week that has had everyone talking about it.
You guys know what this represents? Well, maybe it's the calm before the storm.
What storm, Mr. President?
We have the world's great military people in this room. I will tell you that. And we're going to great evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.
Calm before the storm, and to the president's perspective, after years of failed diplomacy on both sides of the aisle, he believes he's taking a bold approach to foreign affairs. But what do our adversaries think? Here to weigh in, 2 distinguished guests: former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor John Bolton, and retired 4-star general and Fox News military analyst General Jack Keane. I want to start with you, General Keane. What's your sense about the president's comment? It had a lot of people in the media, wondering what is he talking about, but he believes that unpredictability will help him in dealing with North Korea and Iran.
Well, I think you consider those comments, in a backdrop of what the contours of President Trump's emerging national security and foreign policy is. I mean, I think, America First was confusing for a lot of people because it gave the impression that maybe America was going to withdraw from the world. Mm-hmm. But quite the contrary. I mean, what President Trump has done, first, he picked a very good national security team, in my view. And then secondly, he has put America back on a world stage as a global leader, promoting stability, security, and prosperity. In doing that, I think he's got 2 major pillars. One is to reassure our allies, and he and his team have gone around the world to the Far East, Middle East, Europe doing that. And then to get to this comment, he is willing to confront our adversaries in a way that his predecessor, President Obama, never did. Obama was always paralyzed by the fear of adverse consequence, and therefore, time and again, he did nothing. This president sees our adversaries out there, recognizes that they've been trampling over U.S. national interests and those of our allies, and he is dead serious about confronting them. And what do we mean by that? Certainly he wants to use diplomacy, but he's willing to back it up with military strength, very similar to the process that Ronald Reagan used.
Very strong perspective there from General Keane. Seems like Syria would be a glaring example of what he's talking about in terms of the Obama administration sort of plagued by inaction. What's your perspective, Ambassador Bolton?
Well, I think the Syria example is a good one, but I think President Trump campaigned essentially as a problem solver. He did not, in the domestic sphere or in the international sphere, present a comprehensive theory about government. And I think that's one of the reasons that he's distinguished from several of his predecessors. So I think in many respects, his national security policy is evolving. I do believe, clearly, unlike Barack Obama, he appreciates that the proliferation of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons does represent a real threat to the United States, no matter what other country gets these weapons, and that he understands that America can't stand back and expect these countries to be talked out of those pursuits, and that's a critical difference.
Very important indeed. And General Keane, the president went deeper on Twitter by talking about failed diplomacy in previous administrations and basically said presidents and their administrations have been talking to North Korea for 25 years. Agreements made and massive amounts of money paid. Hasn't worked. Agreements violated before the ink was dry, making fools of U.S. negotiators. Sorry, but only one thing will work. It seems like the predicate there is absolutely accurate. Whether it's been Democratic or Republican approaches, it hasn't worked with North Korea. But can you decipher, given your vast military experience, what he's referring to when he says there's really only one option? It seems like he's talking about military action.
Well, from the outset, you know, he sent Secretary Mattis to the Far East 3 days after he took over his duties as Secretary of Defense. And he put the military option back on the table. I think most of us recognize, certainly North Korea and China did, that the Obama administration did not have it on the table. And he's done that to strengthen his diplomatic and economic efforts that he's making. And clearly, he's trying to get in the head of the North Koreans and the Chinese. He appears to get in the head of the Chinese because they're taking action that we have never seen before. Now, we actually have to see that executed and be carried out and see if they really are going to get North Korea in an economic stranglehold. But as Ambassador Bolton and I have said many times on these shows is that economic sanctions have never worked with North Korea. But nonetheless, what's being applied now is a diplomatic effort with economic sanctions as a basis for it, backed up by a commitment, if all else fails, to take military action so we're not going to endanger the lives of the American people. That's kind of where we are, and I think the president's on the right path.
Well, given General Keene's sharp analysis there, Ambassador Bolton, what's your sense about whether there is any diplomatic option, or is the president right that there's really only one option here?
Well, I think there's no diplomatic option in speaking with North Korea. Having tried it for 25 years, there's not the slightest piece of evidence that year 26 of negotiations with North Korea is going to make any difference. I think Prime Minister Abe of Japan recognized that clearly in an op-ed in the New York Times a few weeks ago. I think the one diplomatic play that's left is with China, and it's a hard one. But it is to say to the Chinese, if you really don't want North Korea to have nuclear weapons, which you've been saying for 25 years, there's only one long-term answer, and that's the reunification of the peninsula, which ultimately is in China's own interest. But if that fails, and Lord knows we're not trying it yet, options get very narrow very quickly.
General Keane, as a final word, how hopeful are you that the president, seeming tough, talking tough, putting the military option back on the table, as you say, how hopeful are you that that will actually ultimately lead to North Korea backing down rather than there being military conflict?
Yeah, well, the main actor here is, as Ambassador Bolton has said, is China. And clearly we're moving in that right direction. I mean, what I would like to see is China use their influence to, with some other leader, as the economic stranglehold starts to take place, the team around Kim Jong-un at some point is going to doubt whether his leadership, should be continued or not, and we could have a change in communist leaders with somebody who is a little bit more responsibly aligned with China and the peninsula than what we have right now. That would be a very positive outcome for us in avoiding any military confrontation. That's hopeful. It's not a method, to be sure, to be frank about it, but China's got the cards here, and we'll see how they play out.
Big decisions ahead for the Commander-in-Chief. Appreciate your insight this morning. General Keane, Ambassador Bolton. President Trump, meanwhile, giving a big vote of confidence to a key member of his staff. Those details next. Then, former President George W. Bush leading our wounded heroes on a bike ride around his Texas ranch. It's now an annual tradition, and our own Dr. Mark Siegel went along for the ride.
They all help each other. Vets helping vets is the best way to help people transition from the military to civilian life.
More of President Bush's message to our veterans and what you can do to help next.
.34 here on the East Coast, and we are back with a Fox News alert. Nate may have weakened to a tropical storm, but some areas still underwater this morning.
And the storm's still posing a threat to some states, several of them, as it moves further inland.
We turn now to Chief Meteorologist Rick Reichmuth. Yes, I said it right, for the latest on Nate's Track. Rick,
Yeah, inland flooding is always one of the worst things that we deal with in a tropical storm or a hurricane, and that's really going to be the case with this storm as it pulls up across parts of the really mountainous terrain across the Appalachians, and that is going to wring out a lot of extra moisture. Still moving very, very quick, 23 miles an hour in its forward motion. That's the good news. If that went any slower, we'd be having much bigger problems. But we're going to continue to watch this throughout the day today and across the North Georgia mountains. I think it's going to be the biggest target, and then parts of the mountains of North Carolina as well. By tomorrow, all of that moisture moves in across parts of New England. So get ready kind of for a washout for the next couple of days all across the east. Guys?
All right. Good thing it's moving fast, as you said. Thank you, Rick.
You bet.
All right, turning now to some other headlines that we're following this morning. A hero firefighter saving his girlfriend's life after she gets shot 4 times during that vicious Las Vegas attack. And even after his traumatic experience, Kelly Culbertson joined us earlier on the show telling us he still supports the Second Amendment. Take a listen.
I don't think it's going to be something that's going to be more of a gun control thing. I think it should be more of a gun awareness thing. I understand that everyone has their own right to own guns, and me being one of those people, I'm a firm believer in being able to keep those guns.
Can't even imagine what he's been through. Culbertson's girlfriend still recovering after open heart surgery. Our thoughts and prayers are with her. And President Trump says White House Chief of Staff John Kelly won't have to worry about his job security.
John Kelly is one of the best people I've ever worked with. He told me for the last 2 months he loves it more than anything he's ever done. He will be here, in my opinion, for the entire 7 remaining years.
All right, that's a lot of confidence there. That vote of confidence comes amid reports of turmoil in the Trump administration, including an NBC report saying that Secretary of State Rex Tillerson wanted to resign, which both he and the president have now denied. Also this morning, a student is suing her high school over the Pledge of Allegiance. India Landry was expelled from her Houston school for sitting during the pledge. The 17-year-old says she hasn't stood for it in years because she doesn't believe the flag represents justice for everyone. Her lawsuit is claiming students cannot be forced to stand, as she is now allowed back at school, but says she will continue to sit. And those are some of your headlines this morning.
You seem to want to comment.
I do. I stand. And at 17 years old, I'm just wondering where she's traveled around the world and what she has seen that would make her think that she'll find more justice somewhere else. I always wonder that when people.
We should get her on here. We should get her on and have
her on and ask her that question.
Have you interrogate her.
I'm not going to do it. All right. So former President George W. Bush speaking about the upcoming hurricane benefit concert for the first time.
My dad's library is spearheading a deal where Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, me, and Dad will be there, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fantastic event, and I think we'll raise good money. Look, Texas will come back. We'll bounce back. We'll bounce back strong. It's just going to take a while to get there, and hopefully this concert will let people know we're thinking about it.
The president making the comments to our own Dr. Mark Siegel. You saw him there during the 2017 Bush Warrior 100K ride yesterday, which takes place every year on the Bush Ranch in Crawford, Texas.
Dr. Siegel joins us now for more on that. What a powerful event this is. Doctor, it looks like you're about to go riding yourself.
Abby, Dean, I'm ready to ride, but I'm about 15 minutes behind the Warriors. You can see from the road behind me, this is where they just left, and they're out on the trail already. The weather is perfect for riding. The focus this year is on a new idea called the Warrior Wellness Alliance, where warriors, providers like myself reach out and try to deal with the invisible wounds of war. I ask everybody out there to help. Invisible wounds meaning the wounds you can't see, which are often far worse, blows to the brain, psychological problems. These are key. And I spoke to President Bush yesterday about this, and he revealed his great commitment to the vets and to having them heal. Let's watch.
I'm thrilled y'all are here, and just know that we love you. Let's go ride.
Dave Smith talked to me this morning, and he's talking about, again, mountain biking. Yeah, you have to stay behind the commander-in-chief, he said, but I responded, I don't think that anybody could actually ride ahead of this guy.
Of course he could. Smith is strong. The fact that Dave Smith came here means a lot. Dave lives in Norway now. At one time he was suicidal, and thankfully he walked back and got his life back together, and he's doing great. And a lot of it had to do with serving other people. He got his spirit back, now married, and seems great. Really a happy guy. here at the Bush Center, we focus not only on the vets but on the caregivers. And these wives have been through, you know, a lot. And I wanted to honor the wives and Marlene as well. And that's why I put her in the painting. I thought it was a sweet moment.
It's truly amazing.
I interviewed yesterday, and he talked about a great moment when he first took off his sunglasses and connected with his son.
Rodriguez is a great example. He's an awesome guy. Michael's a part of this peer-to-peer counseling group that have come together as a result of mountain biking and golf. And they all help each other. They've been hurt, and they're coming back from their injuries. And vets helping vets is the best way to help people transition from the military to civilian life.
Woo! Why does it work?
It works because, well, first of all, we figured out what does work. In other words, we're not trying to reinvent things. What we've done is looked at all these different programs, and it's really a three-step process for a vet. One, admit you got a problem. Pretty logical. If a vet kind of keeps it inside, no one will understand what I think, you know, no one can possibly relate to what I feel like, and doesn't share, obviously that leads to, you know, negative consequences. Secondly, when you seek help, you and I can be, you know, we can be sympathetic, but we can't possibly relate to what it's like to see a friend killed in combat. And yet there are others who can. And here in this group, people have progressed from severe depression, a severe case of PTS, to moderate case, in some case, you know, a light case of it, and they can share with their pal what it took. And so it's logical, and it works. Helping vets transition from military life to civilian life is going to be a huge contribution to the country.
Guys, mountain biking is part of the healing, and it's the vets getting together and overcoming obstacles, and I'm about to get back on the course and try to do what I can to help. The Bush Center's Warrior Wellness Alliance is part of the healing. Everybody should reach out and help our vets. They defended our country. Back to you.
Great message.
Great job. Go catch up to them, Dr. Siegel. Go catch the rest of the guys.
Yeah, start rolling.
Great work out there. So powerful, Dr. Siegel.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah, really, so genuine, too.
Yeah, 100%.
And he's the leader of our greatest ally in the Mideast. But did you know that Benjamin Netanyahu went to high school with a Baseball Hall of Famer?
Ooh.
Harvey Levin takes us inside the Israeli Prime Minister's life just ahead.
That is fascinating. Then President Trump hitting the road again this week to pitch his tax reform plan. But are Democrats putting up a roadblock to stop a big win for the president and for you? Maria Bartiromo is here in the flesh.
There she is.
Good morning.
Wow.
This week, President Trump hitting the road yet again, this time Pennsylvania, to pitch his plan for tax reform.
We are going to have more money to spend. It's like handing people money. We're going to have more money to spend on buying product and on doing things. But most importantly, it's tax cuts. We're going to be cutting taxes of people. And I'm really focused on the middle class, and I'm really focused on companies because companies create jobs. So we're going to have the largest tax cut ever.
But are Democrats blocking a victory for the president and the American people? Here to break it all down, Sunday Morning Futures host Maria Bartiromo, looking beautiful as ever.
Who better to have here to do that than this lovely
Then Maria,
lady?
you hear the president talking about tax reform, and of all the things he's been trying to push, you sense the passion in this more than any other issue he talks about.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's real common ground between the members of Congress, Democrat and Republican side, actually. They know that tax reform will move the needle on economic growth. Right now, they're really making the sausage, if you will. And when you go down and dirty on these details, you find out that this state and local tax and property tax deduction is really the fight right now, because basically the high income states like in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, they're saying if you remove that deduction, my constituents will see a tax increase. And frankly, it's true. I mean, you know, if you take away that deduction and then you create a fourth bracket as well, which is what the president has talked about as well, the highest earners in the country will pay more tax.
And that's what the liberals want, though.
I'm sorry?
I mean, I would think.
That's what liberals are looking for.
No, that's what
liberals.
The liberals want, that extra tax bracket.
They do. The liberals
higher
do
end.
want that because they are just like hell bent on this idea that if you lower taxes, you cannot affect the rich.
Right.
And unfortunately, last week on the program, we had Gary Cohn on, and I said on the air, I said, you know, Gary, if you don't cut taxes on the highest earners, then you're not cutting taxes because the highest earners, the top 10% in terms of earners, pay 70% of the tax. So we go to the commercial break. He comes back during the commercial break. He said to me, you know, Marie, I just want you to know you're right, but your numbers are wrong. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, the top 10% pay 80%.
Not 70.
80%.
And they
So
need-
that's, you know.
I've talked to some of the president's top people at Treasury, and they say he needs a win on this.
Yeah.
Because after health care and everything else, how does he get there?
They do need a win. I do think that they are going to have a win on this, actually. Frankly, I think that they want to get tax reform done. They know that they need to get tax reform done. They are going to have a bill on the president's desk, I think, by Thanksgiving. Look, the bill right now, they needed to get through the budget. So we're going to talk with Mick Mulvaney, the head of OMB this morning, the director of Office of Management Budget, to talk about that budget, because this was the window into tax reform. Now, there are some questions about that budget that I want to get to Mick Mulvaney in terms of how these numbers add up, but certainly they had a real victory in the House. That's going to be one of the topics of conversation. And we've got Kevin Brady, chairman of House Ways and Means. So we'll get specifically where they are in this tax package.
We all want to know.
We need a tax break. Everybody needs a victory on this one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we've been living in a 1.5% world in terms of economic growth. We forgot that, 3% and more is achievable. The GDP in 1984, 7.3%.
Wow.
Wow, that was hot numbers.
Puts it in perspective.
Don't
We're
miss Maria
looking forward to
coming
your
up.
show.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thanks for coming in. See you
I'll
top
see
of
you
the
in
hour.
10 minutes.
He's the leader of our greatest ally in the Mideast. But did you know that Benjamin Netanyahu went to high school, the Baseball Hall of Famer?
Harvey Levin, yes, he takes us inside the Israeli Prime Minister's life. Next, I want to see this.
Yeah, which Hall of Famer is that?
Reggie Jackson.